Hi, this is Paul. There was some interesting stuff in the Styxhexenhammer666 Pageau conversation that happened. I made some clips and I posted one I think on my clip channel. I posted a few of them on Twitter. I've been playing around lately with doing some reaping from videos in short things and posting short videos on Twitter and trying to prompt discussion there, but I thought this probably deserved a little bit of treatment on my channel as such. So let's take a listen.
That would be close. So I was raised.
This is Styxhexenhammer sort of giving his background story. Now, over the last 4 years, a number of you have pointed his channel to me. I've watched a few of his videos, haven't really paid a lot of attention to him. Obviously, Styxhexenhammer666 is there to attract attention with respect to Satanism, and he talks about that a little bit in his introduction here.
Raised a marginally Christian, like in the liberal Christian sense. So you have a Bible in the house. Sometimes you read it. You go to church on Christmas and Easter, basically, and then you do the Lord's Prayer at night. Became actually much more religiously Christian in the Protestant non-denominational sense when I was in my late teens. Had abandoned that contemporary to when I went to college. Some people think that's because I was indoctrinated, but it actually had more to do with witnessing fundamentalist Christians on the internet. Had nothing to do with my studies or anything. Became a Satanist well, technically a hardline, just atheist first. Then I discovered atheistic Satanism. I use that as a stepping stone.
It's very interesting. I was young enough, I'm old enough to remember the Satanist panic of the 80s. There were all these stories about Satanists, and it seems like part of what happened was just a big piece of Satanism was just simply trolling. And you find that today with some of the Satanists. It's just the easiest way to troll certain kinds of Christians is to say, I'm a Satanist, and then go off with that.
Essentially to purge myself of false guilt and fear. And then I realized, well, that's all that Satan.
Now that false guilt and fear is not a small thing. And it comes up in a fair number of randos comments. Not as often as you would think. But it's the sense that you heard it in the Audrey Assad deconstruction story, where especially certain types of people who tend to be high in trait anxiety or neuroticism, and they're always anxious. And so what is God thinking about me? What is God thinking about me? And I've long noted that for certain kinds of people, a big piece of their deconstruction is, again, to depersonalize the cosmos. Because then if bad stuff happens, it's nobody's fault. But it really drives them crazy that if bad stuff happens, it's God's fault, and it's betrayal. Because betrayal feels worse to us than mindless, purposeless calamity. It's sort of the difference between, Peterson talks about this quite a bit, between malice and just bad stuff happening for no reason at all. Now, that's framed obviously within certain assumptions, certain metaphysical assumptions about the universe. But again, that little piece that he said right there is actually pretty important.
Can ever offer anyone. What am I doing? And I decided to just study all spirituality. When I call myself a pagan, it's because I'm not part of the Abrahamic mainline religious tradition. It doesn't mean I have a specific denomination or church, and I'm an occultist. So I'm interested in studying every religion. I'm working on.
Now, when people talk this way, you just have to pause, because it's sort of like saying, I'm a friend to all people. Okay. But you do not have enough time in your life to actually develop a friendship towards all people. You will only have the capacity to touch on a limited amount. And in fact, when you approach it in this way, given the story that he's had, there's a lot that's already built in terms of your biases and your approach. There is no clean slate from which to view the world. None of us have it. There's no metaphysical clean room from which for us to have this pure view of the world. Now, again, those of you who've been following my videos for a long time, A monarchical vision tries to imagine we have such a view, but to the degree that it's basically a pretty naive position. I'm not saying his position is naive, but just to imagine that I see the world simply as it is. No, you see the world through all of the history and all of the culture and all of everything that you bring to the world, because you need all that machinery in order to see the world. If you imagine you are seeing the world just as such, you might think that you're as simply as that my pliers sees the world as such. No, my pliers has no capacity to see the world at all.
Book of Mystic Christianity right now, another one on actually religion, denomination or church, and I'm an occultist, so I'm interested in studying every religion. I'm working on Book of Mystic Christianity right now, another one on actually Jewish fables from the Talmud, the religious history works from paganism. I don't really care. I just want to study as much as possible.
Excellent. And how about yourself, Jonathan?
Well, I mean, it's interesting because in a way, I think I have a similar story as Taro. Like, I grew up in a more practicing family. Like my family, my father was a Baptist pastor. I didn't experience the crazy fundamentalism in my own family. My father was actually a very intelligent and curious person who encouraged exploration and thought. But let's say around me in the culture, that's what the culture I was bathing in, let's say, in terms of evangelical Christianity. And the same, like in my 20s, I just realized that this is not going to do. Like, it's just not going to do for many reasons. And so I started to study mystical traditions, and to some extent.
So it's very interesting, the deconstruction stories, because this is right there, in a sense, Pageau deconstructed. I mean, he did. He deconstructed the faith. His parents. Gotta pause. Trying to make videos this time of year is just nuts. It's just somebody made the comment in one of my videos that you seem a little scattered lately, and you're and yeah, I'm just beset by needy people right now who have some legitimate needs that need attention, and I just don't have the time to kind of sit down and formulate things. So a lot of the stuff you're getting in the videos recently is pretty chaotic and not terribly integrated. So it's really raw material. Anyway, back to the video.
Extent, let's say, what you could kind of call esotericism or late occultism.
Okay, I remember what I was thinking before I got interrupted by the phone. Pageau, I mean, deconstruction, again, as we said often in this channel, is not necessarily a bad thing. One of the interesting things is what we know of Jonathan Pageau's family is that even though he departed from the faith that his father, I don't know this for sure, I haven't interviewed his father, so Jonathan or Machu, if you think your father would like to talk to me, I'd be curious to talk to him too. But the fact that even though Jonathan Pageau pivoted, changed his perspective, coming from a well put together Christian family matters. All of that investment, all of that credibility, all of that trustworthiness, that matters. And so even when Jonathan sort of pivoted and moved into what he moved into, it's like he didn't lose the investment, and that's different from let's say a shallow or a marginally or a nominal Christian household. And that isn't to say that great saints and wonderful Christian people can't come from nominal Christian backgrounds, or even tremendously antithetical Christian backgrounds, or really screwed up Christian backgrounds. I mean, people come from all different places, but if you manage to love your children and your Christianity is well integrated, it's going to help people, even when they turn from the faith, but also if they keep the faith and sort of pivot within it.
But I also felt like there's mystical traditions and to some extent, let's say what you could kind of call esotericism or, for many reasons. And so I started to study mystical traditions and to some extent, let's say what you could kind of call esotericism or, late occultism. But I also felt like that wasn't enough because I felt like that there was something off about occultism, especially. And then when I discovered Christian mysticism itself and the early fathers, I just realized that everything I'd been looking for was there already. And then
Now, part of what's interesting is we've talked on the channel before, especially with respect to the Rest is History podcast. So I was watching The Bachelorette last night, the season finale, and Michelle and Nate with a Y are, they're in their final date, and here they meet a Mexican holy man, and he's burning some stuff in some bowls that look religious-y, and he's telling them things, and they're pushing the smoke on each other. And what's amazing about this neo-paganism is how absolutely up to date it all is in terms of the little prescriptions they're pushing. It's all the buzzwords, the holy words. It's all the cult of authenticity, and it's like, isn't it amazing that when you peel back Christianity, you find 2021 postmodern cult of authenticity, which again, back to the Rolf Deegan quote, people report feeling most authentic when they are doing what external society values, not when they are acting in accordance with their actual personalities. You would expect, let's say, if you could time travel a shaman from pre-Columbian Mexico into the 21st century, there would be no frame of reference in order for these two worlds to connect. And this is part of what Pageau will go on to talk about, and what Paul North, King's North, talked about in his Rebel Wisdom, and what was discussed in on the Rest is History with respect to neo-paganism. It's sort of, you basically take this baseline squishy Christian ethic and put on top of it a bunch of things that maybe you can take from pictures and descriptions, mostly recorded by Christian missionaries and Christians, and put them on top and sort of blend it all together in service of whatever religious sentiment very much found in our time you're wanting to pursue. And then, of course, everyone will go, oh, ah. And it's sort of the cult of the old. Now, I want to be careful here because I think there are ways in which Christians can do exactly the same thing. They deconstruct from one thing, and then, let's say in evangelicalism, this is the true Christianity of the apostles, not the stuff with all of the Roman Catholicism or orthodoxy and drama. And what you sort of get is what you have in Jerusalem, where they have, I've never been there, but you have the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is probably on the site where the tomb was. But then you have this other thing called the Garden Tomb. And the Garden Tomb looks like all the stuff on Christmas, Easter cards. And so, Americans, especially evangelicals, flock there and are like, this must be it. Well, why must it be it? Because it looks exactly how I imagine Jesus would picture this. But that's the point. I'm working on my sermon on Jesus in the temple as a 12-year-old, and one of the things that I started doing was working on this is a blog where I just keep tons and tons of links. And so, stories of Jesus as a boy. And these are fascinating because we know pretty much the texts that we gather these stories from are all quite late, and they're basically sort of fan fiction for Jesus, but they're filled with stories like this. One of the children moved with envy about the passages for water, or, pools of water. Little Jesus was making, working in the mud or making, water pipes or something, and overthrew what Jesus had built. Jesus caused him to die. I mean, in these sayings, little children cross Jesus and he kills them. And the parents came complaining. I think they would complain if your son killed my son. Joseph asked Mary to speak with Jesus, but honey, he's killing kids again. Oh, Jesus, don't kill any more children, please. Okay, Mom, I guess you're right. So Jesus kicked the boy's backside and he came back to life. Okay. Whatever you think of the Bible and the canonical accounts, okay? And I'll make an argument in my sermon. It'll be in the rough draft. This story says a lot about the culture. I think if people were making up stories of Jesus today, stories of little boy Jesus running around Nazareth, they would not include Jesus killing his playmates. They would probably include Jesus being nice and zen and kind, really, really kind, so kind that, Jesus is including, people from all over the world, and Jesus is basically doing exactly what everyone would expect spirituality looks like now. That's what it would look like. Because what we do is we take our imagination, we just sort of fill in the gaps, and there we have it. And this process is inevitable, because that's simply the process by which we appropriate things. And what that means is that the truth is always stranger and, in fact, more offensive than we can really get our minds around. And this is, I think, to me, this is part of the validation of canonical orthodoxy, because when we imagine God coming to world, what we imagine is basically some Freudian projection of ourselves, just sort of writ large. But the Jesus we find in the Gospels, so then you compare this, as I do in my sermon, with Luke chapter 2, and Mary's all upset because Jesus has lingered in the temple and they've been looking for him for 3 days, and Mary is, all upset with Jesus. And this isn't Mary scolding Jesus. I mean, it sort of is, but Jesus kind of scolds her back. And the text says, and they were confused. And a story like that has a ring of truth to it, because it just doesn't fit. Now, once the story is set, that story then begins to shape things moving forward. And real things have that sense. And what I mean by real, kind of following on C.S. Lewis, is that they're durable in a way that they don't seem like they're sort of, they don't seem like they're just sort of made up from the fabric of religious things. And that's often the problem with a lot of neo-appropriations of old things that we want usually to use against other established things that we're trying to improve upon.
I also discovered the art of the church, like the amazing iconography that the church had developed for about the first 1,000 years. And it became my own art practice. So I'm an iconographer. And the architecture, the liturgy, all of this kind of amazing dance, you could call it, like this great ritual dance that was there in the church.
Now let's give it to the Orthodox and the Catholics. What we're really looking for is a living tradition. Is something that there's sort of a chain of memory that goes back. Now let's be fair to the Protestants. Those chains get corrupted. But part of the difficulty that any neo-paganism has is that, okay, do you have a chain? Now, if you look at, let's say, Native American spirituality in the Americas, well, they have a much closer hope of something because they, their chain is so much newer. Let's say Navajo spirituality, Zuni spirituality in the American Desert Southwest, other places in the Americas or other places in the world where it's not so far away. They actually sort of have a hope. But if you're 5, 10, 15 generations, 20 generations removed from something, you're probably not in any way dealing with the same thing. And this is a point Pageau will make a little bit later on.
So then I just became Orthodox because it seemed like it was the only branch of Christianity that had preserved this mystical aspect, that not only preserved it, but that was central to the faith. And that also preserved all the art and all this language that you could call it. So and
this for me was actually one of the cleanest, clearest articulations I've heard by Jonathan of, this is why I chose orthodoxy. So, and when I heard it, I thought, makes perfect sense.
That's what happened to me. And so I've been Orthodox since 2003 now.
And I want to go on.
And that's not, since 2003, that's not an incidental point. He's coming up on 20 years. And so someone who is able to stay within something for 2 decades, it says a lot about the person. And again, it talked about the formation of his parents and stability. But it also says something about the tradition. And that he's not just all over. I was this, and there was that, and there was this, and there was that, there was this, and that. No, I've been in this, and in this in terms of a community, not just sort of self-identifying as this and sort of freestyling all the time, which this is sort of where Styxhexenhammer is going to sort of go, and where they're going to talk.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I had a question to start the convo, but if you want to go ahead, Lev.
Well, the only question would be here as far as Jonathan's path. You mentioned that you were interested in a lot of the mystical occult elements, but eventually you found what you were seeking within those elements within Christianity. If you were to make a good persuasive argument, let's say, but in a friendly way, obviously, to Styx, as far as what was it about the occult that eventually got you away from that, and what was it within Christianity that brought you to that, so that maybe, who knows, maybe Styx will be converted today. We'll see what happens.
And the other side would be what
they're so evangelical.
Styx found lacking in Christianity would be the other
exactly.
point.
Yeah.
That'll be after. And everybody, by the way, subscribe and also need those super chats. We're going to read those at the end. Anyway, Go for it, Jonathan.
So I think that if we look at Western Christianity, we kind of see a change in the late Middle Ages happening, and we, through nominalism and through different things, when the Reformation happens and the Counter-Reformation happens, it kind of crystallizes all of this. And so it seems like what we see is what I call a kind of deincarnation. And so what you see is a kind of Christianity that's at the bottom, that is very basic, that becomes very literalistic and very moralistic as well. And then what happens is, out of that comes these weird Christian esoteric branches. If you look at Freemasonry, but then the idea of the Rosy Cross and all of these organizations that pop out of Christianity and then start to want to have the more mystical aspect of it, but let's say divorced from the church, or divorced from the ground, you could say. And so I have sympathy for that. Like, I have sympathy for people that wanted that, because I don't want this milquetoast moralistic Christianity. I don't want that.
And I think this is a very interesting insight on Jonathan's part about the rise of a whole hosts of movements, some of which we touched, some of which, Michael Martin has talked about in his Karen Wong interview and his conversation with John Vervaeke and Nate Heil. There's just slews of movements like this that developed, especially at the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, and everybody trying to recapture. I mean, one might even so much of of Christianity has had the same impulse. There's often a sense that, well, we have lost the thing in itself, and we have gone astray, and we want to try to get back to it. And the way we can get back to it is, and it might be, a whole variety of things. We're gonna take the Bible even more seriously, or we're going to double down on the teachings of this one person who seemed to capture it. There's always this sense that the thing itself is available to us, and I'm not saying that skeptically, but we can get closer if we do this. And so in many ways it's part of Jonathan's search as well, and he came to the decision that following orthodoxy as such was the best way to have a connection all the way back to Christ and to Christ, because in almost every case there's a person who we try to connect ourselves back to. I mean, Islam to Muhammad, the Quran, a person or a book, let's say.
Either. But I think the problem that happens is that at some point this separation becomes a hostility. And then that hostility becomes one of the sources for the breakdown of the West. That is, it starts to manifest the fragmentation of our societies. And I think that one of the problems that happens with kind of esoteric thinking in general is that it's so high up that there's no room for the regular people to participate in it. And so you drop the regular people, and then the regular people, they end up doing their thing, and then you're not part of their world, and it breaks the world apart.
And I thought this was a tremendous point that Jonathan made. I think to maybe connect the worlds a little bit more, I think we should include in the conversation what we would call folk religion, because folk religion tends to be the filler. You've got people who are obviously intelligent, like Styxhexenhammer. I had a very interesting conversation today with another academic, but an autodidact like Styxhexenhammer, who is obviously able to read text. He's self-learning. He's going about this. He's got a YouTube channel. I mean, YouTube is the glory for autodidacts in many ways. And so you can just search all these things and read all these things and write books and have a following. And of course, this stuff has gone on long before that. You've had founders of many movements who have been brilliant, and they find patrons, and they produce things in the world, and those things get picked up by cults and groups and fan bases and on and on. But what tends to fill in the gap tends to be folk religion, which usually, I think, in some ways continues to preserve the kinds of religious instincts and habits and traditions that sort of naturally arise out of the combination of a culture which has been infused by one of these far more powerful world religions with the sort of practices that help people get by every day with all the common sorts of challenges that ordinary everyday life presents to them, which in many ways makes our own time quite interesting, because the nature of those challenges is changing.
And then it leads people, especially then it leads them into idiosyncrasies up here. And then you get all the weird stuff. You get weird stuff like Sabbateanism and basically Satanism, where the people that are super smart and are supposed to be the elites are basically acting for themselves or actively acting to destroy the society. Like, I mean, not in the sense that they're physically doing it, but let's say intellectually they're breaking down the structure. And so I think that all of that has led to the breakdown of our world, and has led down to the breakdown of society. And so what I see in orthodoxy is
now when he says this has led to the breakdown of our world or the breakdown of our society, I was thinking about the role of world religions. I forget what video I was listening to, but how I think in many ways these world religions have enabled societies to scale up. And it isn't, when we think about a capacity to scale up, we usually look at the visible structures, bureaucracies, institutions that we say, oh, this is what is scaffolding the society. And those being the visible manifestations, I think, are really, again, sort of the tip of the iceberg. I mean, that whole analogy is based on the idea that only the tip is visible. All of the other assumptions that are in culture, in society, transmitted implicitly. Had a good conversation on the Discord. Didn't record it. It's still trying to figure out how to manage, how to play around with the Discord in this way. But, someone asked me about, again, I get the question quite often because the demographic mass of my channel is sort of in the age where you're having your first children and they're small and they're still at home. And as a parenting advice, and the first advice I always give is be the person you want your child to become. Work really hard on that, because more than your words, more than a lot of the overt religious things that you are going to try to show them, those are the things that will imprint on your child to an enormous degree. Because we are, again, it's the video I did about joint attention. That is how we are forming our children and forming ourselves. And so, again, this is part of the reason why, if you have really solid Christian parents, the odds are that the worldview that your children will eventually inhabit will have a good amount of the solidity that yours did. I mean, these questions and these, let's say, computations, I have been watching devs a little bit. I haven't gotten through it. It was, some people recommended that show to me. But the computations are just so enormously complex. We can't help but use narrative and other symbols to sort of approximate the kinds of processes that actually result in a person's life.
See that you have room for these high mystics that live, like idea of the naked ascetics that live on the top of Mount Athos and are like invisible and naked and no one sees them, and then they can manifest themselves.
It just reminds me of that movie, was it Magic Men, where they had, these these fake superheroes. And, there's one guy, his power was invisibility, but it only worked when he was naked. So he's usually popping out, and they're like, "We can see you."
To the monks if they want to. And so there's this whole hierarchy of spiritual realization. But at the bottom of that is like is your cousin, your aunt who doesn't know much, but they can still cross themselves and go to church and go to confession and take communion. And it's all integrated into a giant thing.
Okay. And that's the scale issue. And I haven't yet got around to finding those other conversations that John Vervaeke was doing about scale, because this point of scale is fundamental to, I think, the larger question. A big piece of what we're chasing here is just how to describe what it is we're looking for, and that which is attainable, and the only that which is attainable in the short term. We're not trying to get too ahead of ourselves in terms of eschatology, things that are finally ultimate and eschatological. It's still the best word for it. But civilizations in the past, imperfect though every single one of them were, achieved something, and they only achieve it if, in fact, you achieve that level of scalability that Pageau is talking about here. And so, if, in fact, the system that you are promoting is too high, you're just going to be a just yet another strange person out there writing things, and in all likelihood forgotten. And sort of the mass of the folk religious will be the ones that shape history. In a lot of what's going on, I did a video a little bit about some of the fight within the evangelical world. A lot of that is actually a dealing with folk religion, because a really robust, healthy, powerful religious tradition will impact and scale down and afford betterment and improvement at the levels of folk religion. And in many ways, the challenge of a religious tradition and the challenge of those who would like to shape a religion into the future is all about engaging people at every level. And so if the core or the body of the religion that you're attempting to promote does not have niches all up and down a whole variety of scales. And again, IQ isn't the only scale we're dealing with. You're dealing with vocational diversity. You're dealing with age diversity. It's got to work for the 90-year-old. It's got to work for the 90-year-old who is likely facing their death. It's got to work for the 50-year-old who is at the top of their power curve in terms of their career and their family life. It's got to work for the 30-year-old who is just starting a family and trying to figure out how to feed kids and make money and house them and manage them. It's got to work for the 20-year-old who is just getting started in life. It's got to work for the 15-year-old. It's got to work for the 6-year-old and the 5-year-old. And it's got to work across cultures. Part of what, the difference between a kingdom and an empire is that an empire is made up of hundreds of little kingdoms. And your religion's going to have to scale in that way too. And so this point that Pageau is making is really rather vital.
So I think that to me that makes a lot more sense. And I think what unites it is Christ. It's united is that notion of incarnation and how incarnation kind of joins the extremes together into one moment.
And again, because I wrote the sermon this afternoon, you see this even in the Lucan account where Jesus, you basically have, in Luke, you have two accounts of when Jesus was, before Jesus' public ministry. The first account is his dedication in the temple, where Jesus is obviously an infant, and so his parents and the Anna and, I forget the man's name, who come and prophesy over Jesus, they're forefronted. But then Jesus then is forefronted in the story of Jesus in the temple. But again, even in these texts, Jesus is from Nazareth, which is no place, so he's from the fringe, but he's vital in the center of the world, which is the temple. And so again, you see that scalability in Jesus' life. And part of what you see in Christianity is, in fact, this radical scalability where you can have people who know very little. Again, I've used the illustration before of there was a man who made profession of faith at the church, and he was an individual with Down syndrome. And for decades later, I would hear testimony from council members who were in that room when this, at that point, he was middle-aged, a really young adult, maybe in his 20s or 30s. The profession of faith that he made moved the church leaders to tears. It was so beautiful and it was so powerful. And, well, part of that is obviously the individual making the profession, but part of that is the capacity of that religion to scale. And so it's got to be, we've been talking, quite a bit more beauty first. It's not only got to be intelligible at every level, it's got to be beautiful at every level, and it's got to work at every level. And that's not something that you just sort of ad hoc or make up. And there's a reason everybody's looking to old things, and that's, again, back to the Nassim Taleb-Lindy effect, because old things endure.
And that becomes the fruit for the church and the fruit for, So that's why I think it makes more sense. Yeah.
Well, that's a very good.
And they get this little window with the comments, and this person says, while carrying on important pagan traditions under Christianity, now Christianity is on its way out. Paganism is still here. Actually, paganism has been wiped out, and what a lot of people are trying to do is to create a new paganism, basically out of drips and drabs of Christianity and pragmatism and stuff that they find left over in books mostly written by Christians about pagans. That's really more of, and then probably out of the study of anthropology, but obviously all of that study is through the filter of modernity, which again has a tremendous amount of Christianity built into it. So all of this talk about Christianity being on its way out, that's sort of like saying, yeah, air breathing. I think air breathing is on its way out. Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I'm not quite sure how you're going to retrofit all these humanoids and have us breathe whatever it is you think we're going to be breathing next.
Good understanding of contextualizing Christianity within our own contemporary epoch of immense liquid modernity fragmentation. I know we're very lucky to have both of you. I know people have referred to you as part of the, what do they say, Four Horsemen of Meaning or whatever, which I think is totally cringe. I was just...
Yeah, so
the other
Styx.
coin,
Yes.
Yeah, defense of Christianity in the modern world. But you as an occultist or a pagan, what led you down to the questioning of the roots of Christianity, and what do you find within... I don't know if you're a polytheist or anything like that, but...
No,
yeah, but well, first of all, what do you believe in terms of a sort of spiritual source or so forth? So maybe contextualize your belief. I know it's very hard. Like I don't want to pin people down, but what do you mean by
that's what I would say is the occult: the search for truth, the search for what is hidden. It doesn't posit necessarily proof of truth. What I've done, my metaphor for it is, with most mainline religions, you're trying to find the right path, and you go along that right path to your end goal. And by the way, to Jonathan, I don't begrudge you that, because you feel that you found, your...
Now, what's amazing to me is that whenever someone says, well, you're trying to find the right path, and our right path is that there's no right path. Okay. And what you mean is that there is a right path, and there isn't. Okay, you're going to have to say more, because actually living this out would be a little tough.
Particular path, it fulfills you, it gives you meaning and so forth. And I've pointed out several times.
Okay, so the question is self-validating. If this feels authentic to me, well then, but again, then we go back to this little tweet. People report feeling most authentic when they are doing what external society values, not what they are according to their own actual personalities. Now, again, the actual personalities that they're talking about here is what they're looking through basically a modernistic lens, the Big Five personality profile. But it's the criticism in general seems to hold.
In the past, when I was more linked to hardline atheism, I considered that, maybe stupid. Now I'm like, well, as far as the pragmatic effect, it's not destabilizing anything. It's not harming anyone. It's the organized religious structure when it's abusive that I have a problem with. And that's partially my own civic views. What I would say, though, in my belief is that...
And also when it's abusive, and rightfully so, but that's all the dead reckoning A/B testing stuff. Because, yeah, the 2-year-old says, well, you spanked me, you don't really love me, or you're not giving me chocolate, you don't really love me. Well, maybe you shouldn't have chocolate.
It's not trying to find one path, stick with it forever to the exclusion of others. It's more looking at all of the paths, wander down one for a while, switch to another one if you feel inclined to do so, research and learn as much as possible, think as much as possible, And what I've said is that the occult doesn't really work for most people. The occult, as I envision it, being that,
which again is exactly what Pageau was just talking about.
That kind of strenuous search for truth is only going to work for a minority of human beings. And by the way, it has nothing to do with intelligence. It has more to do with interest and maybe stamina as far as that kind of subject material goes. So you have ignorant people following organized religion because they were born into it. They don't want to question it. You have intelligent people like Jonathan who have found a religion.
And again, so often when he talks, it's like, wait a minute, you just said it has nothing to do with intelligence, but now you're using intelligence as the differentiator. When I thought what you said before was more sound in that, well, it really doesn't have anything to do with intelligence. It has a lot to do with a whole range of other things, most of which are constraints and real things, relationships, context in our lives that actually have a lot of power in terms of determining what we're going to do and where we're going to do it.
Religion, and they've decided to stick with it because they've got that sort of importance that they give to it. They've looked into it. They feel fulfilled. I would also say that, technically speaking, if you're following a more mystic version of Christianity, and this would be more definitely closer to the Orthodox tradition or some of the others than like Catholicism or mainline Protestantism.
Oh, so Orthodox is mystical, and Catholicism and mainline Protestant, well, maybe mainline Protestantism, but there's plenty of mysticism going on all over the Christian denominational tree.
Technically speaking, that is occultism, as far as I would personally describe it. If you are attaching mystic symbolic importance to the Christian tradition in your understanding, technically speaking, that doesn't make you separate from the occultists.
Well,
technically speaking, according to his definition of the word, now you get to a folk religion technician of the definition of the word occult, and they're going to be hearing something else.
If you define it as like the secret society side of the occult, like the Freemasons and Rosicrucians, maybe it's different from that. But again, those are organized groups, which is something that I myself have always shied away from. I'll study them. I'll listen to.
What is study? Isn't study an organized approach to a body of knowledge? Otherwise, you're browsing, or you're gazing, or you're,
I'll certainly read their books, but I'm not going to become like a Freemason or something. I don't even think they'd welcome me because I'm technically an apatheist.
Well, Styx, in terms of your search for the truth, what would be the reasons why you wouldn't go completely on Jonathan's path as far as becoming, let's say, more of an esoteric Christian, or maybe going up to Mount Athos, joining a monastery, things of that nature? What would be the things that would make you hesitate about that if we're going more into the nitty-gritty in terms of what the truth is?
Yeah, because I give the search and more importance than the end goal. It's like when you read a good book. The ending is sort of bittersweet. It's the adventure that leads up to the ending that really is where you're living.
And now, again, if you listen to Peterson, he would say, yeah, the sort of the power portion of the meaning curve is much more in the search than in the arrival. And that's true. And so basically you're saying, well, I'm a meaning junkie. If it's giving me meaning right now, I'm going to be there, but I'm going to keep looking for that meaning, and I'm going to follow meaning wherever it takes me. Okay, but then you're not really searching for truth. Then you're searching for the experience of meaning. You're basically comparable to an adrenaline junkie that says, well, landing isn't so much fun, but the falling and hopefully the parachute opens. That's really the thing that I live for. And basically what you're saying is you're living for a chemical hit. That's
life, ends. It terminates biologically at the end of that life. It's all the things you've done up until then, all the searches and adventures that you've had that are notable, that someone would write about. The death is a little postscript.
The anadromist was in the comment section. Look at that.
That's how I choose to live my life, looking through all these things. But I would say I'd have no problem going up and talking to monks in a monastery. And if I looked into mystic Christianity after the Orthodox path, and I'm sure I'll encounter books on it at some point, considering my voracious reading, I'd be very interested in studying and learning more about it and the symbology associated with it. It's just, I'd go to a monastery, but I wouldn't consign myself to one and say, okay, for the indefinite future, when I might get bored, this might not be for me.
I'd like to sleep with your wife. I just don't want to marry her. Oh, okay. I can understand that.
Just going to sit here. I'm going to meditate upon God, etc.
But Styx, don't you say that that's maybe...
I'd like to go and I'd like to go and participate in the Olympics. I just don't want to train for it. Oh, okay.
A life that is ungrounded in or uninstantiated within a particular tradition, and that's sort of like that wayfarer state, like as you've admitted, isn't for everyone. But also, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I just said yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh, so Jonathan, it's funny. Recently, my father was doing a driveway near this Orthodox church, and he was talking to the head priest and his son, and he handed me this pamphlet and everything, and I don't know if it's a sign, but I don't think I could really give up Catholicism. I mean, it's as an Italian, it's genetic, you know. But I do wish that we had
that Pope, though. You'll see how long you'll last.
Well, they say he's on his way out health-wise. I don't know. That's just a rumor. But
yeah, I mean, there is supposed to be an anti-pope at a certain point, according to Revelation, right?
Yeah, isn't there a prophecy of the popes? And
it's the prophecy.
Allegedly, you're on the last one now.
Yeah.
But as far as go on.
But it's no. I was gonna say that I wish that in.
Oh my! And Sevilla's in the comments section saying, "Please make sure Styx obtains the language of creation by Pageau's brother Pageau."
Catholicism, we had a word that the Orthodox have. Am I pronouncing right? Prelast.
Prelist.
Yeah, prelist. Yeah.
Yeah, the Russian accent over here.
It seems that it seems that the world has been caught up in various spiritual delusions within the past 100 years, but I would say the last 2 years especially. But so Styx claimed that that orthodoxy is another form of occultism, which is very spicy.
Well,
so,
the mystic side of it, at least.
Yeah. So maybe Jonathan, you could just. Yeah. I'm sorry, I cut you off, Lev. I'm sorry.
Well, I would say so. Listening to what Styx is saying, I understand. Like I understand the impetus, but I think that. Think about it like that. The spiritual path is something like going up a mountain. That's a pretty simple vision that you have, and you see that in many mystical traditions. That the idea is that you're going up this mountain and that you're going higher up in the world. Like you're basically understanding more of it, participating in more of it. When you get to the top of the mountain, you're at the summit of the world and you're above everything. And you've basically you can encapsulate the world in your view, The difficulty I think with this simply this exploratory path is that you don't end up going up the mountain. You end up hop, skipping, and jumping around the base of it, and there's a value in practice, right? Yeah, and there's a value in practice where practice is difficult. If you want to practice something, let's say you practice a certain form of meditation or a certain form of prayer, or a certain form, it's actually difficult and it takes time and it takes a lot of energy to do that. So
what this approach prevents is achievement.
What happens if you skip and jump around the base of the mountain and you're like, oh, well, here's a little Kabbalism, here's a little bit of like American esotericism, theosophy.
It's basically the difference between reading, let's say, reading a significant book on something and reading the encyclopedia.
Or whatever, all these things that exist. I think the difficulty that happens is that you become a dilettante in a way. You become someone who knows a lot about things, but you don't necessarily have the deep practice that will lead you up the mountain. And you see that like...
And then the question is, what is all of this for? Is your telos to know a lot about a few things, like sort of like an encyclopedia? or is your telos a degree of transformation? And right now, transformation is a very big deal. A lot of people are looking for transformation, Christian, non-Christian, and a lot of people are giving up Christianity because they say, well, I don't think Christianity has demonstrated itself to be capable of transformation, not only for me, but scaling up and transforming society. I'd say, broadly speaking, that's in a sense what many, many people are looking for. Simply a mapping of the landscape is not a changing of the things that are going to be reflected in the map.
I remember reading an interview with Joseph Campbell, and someone asked Joseph Campbell, have you had some of these mystical experiences you talk about? And he says no. And he says no because I just study religions. Basically, I don't have access to them. Like, he can't be initiated because
I don't have access to them. That's that inside outside. Again, if you go back to Vervaeke talking in the Four Horsemen video, I thought he made a powerful point in that modernity presupposes that all information is sort of flat, available, and public. That's what knowledge is. It's all flat, available, and public. And the reason it is so is because the reason that's connected with modernity is because it's all propositional. And propositional is it's upper register, it's timeless, it's can be put into little boxes, and there it all is. And so anybody hovering above can look at all the propositional information. Now, this is easily demonstrated to not be the case, because sit down with someone, let's say a therapist, and the therapist will be, well, tell me what it's like to be you. Tell me what it's like to be in your marriage. Tell me what it's like to be in your family. Tell me what it's like to be in your religion. Tell me what it's like to be in that relationship. And you can talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. And there's a sense in which the therapist might learn and learn and learn. And maybe at great pains through many years, gain this. It's, again, sort of the difference between saber and conocer in Spanish. Saber is sort of surface, modernist, knowing that, propositional. Conocer is participatory, procedural, perspectival. That's what the conocer is. It's this deeper way of knowing. Adam knew Eve. Oh, that's Eve. Hi, Eve. No, that's not what it's talking about. And when it comes to, well, I know lots of things, but you might not know any one thing. And in many ways, to know the world, not only do you need to know many things, but you need to know everything all the way down to the roots. And you say, well, nobody can know that. Well, that's sort of what the point is of having this word and this concept and imagining the reality of God, because all the things all the way down, all the time, forever, both ways, that's kind of the purpose. And in fact, understanding why so many religions begin to use this idea of God, because that then is the way into everything. Apart from that, you're just up here at the surface knowing all things and knowing nothing, in a sense. It's like saying, I know exactly what marriage is. Have you ever been married? No. I know exactly what it's like to be a dog. Most of us wouldn't say that, because we have a sense of, I can kind of imagine what it's like to be a dog, but I can't really know what it's like to be a dog. And actually, the more you learn about the dog, the more you realize that dog is living in a strangely different world than I am. But to run around and saying, I've seen lots of dogs, I know dogs. And that's where Pageau kind of makes his point about being a dilettante. Part of the irony of this is that we're talking about mysticism. And if there's almost anything that has built into it the idea of achievement and development and private knowledge, as opposed to exposed propositional knowledge, it's mysticism. It just boggles my mind that this is the position that, well, it's like saying all mysticism is the same. All marriages are the same. All countries are the same. All cultures are the same. The world is full of, in many ways, conocer type knowledge. He's
not on a path. And so I think that to me would be the difficult part. Like think of it that way, because there is an aspect of initiation in even in esoteric Christianity. There's a sense in which you kind of have to be initiated, and that.
Now, what does he mean by initiation? It means that there is a chain of people, that this isn't something you're going to cook up out of a book as such. It's just something that it's going to be embedded in the procedural, the participatory, the perspectival, not just the propositional.
That, and you have to have someone who basically brings you up, either whether it's institutionally or just informally. That's how Christianity works. You're initiated. Christianity is an initiatory religion. You receive, you're baptized, and then you're chrismated, and then you take communion, and so all of this is like a movement into the mountain, or a movement up the mountain, you could say. Well, so I think that to me is maybe at least like as an idiosyncrasy, I can understand that you would do that, but I think that it definitely can't be a model. I don't know if you see what I'm saying. Like, it can't be a model for society.
Well, can there be?
I understand your point,
yeah.
but well, here I've got to weigh in on that though. But what I would say is this: there are millions of mountains, and the mountains have more than one path up them. And so what you've done is
Now, I talked about this on Twitter, and that's something you say if you don't know a mountain well. I mean, right now on Netflix, there's all the people love making documentaries about these mountain climbers. And what do they do when they climb a mountain? They plan a route. And now they're going to be doing a lot of figuring things out on the way up, but there isn't every way up that mountain. That happens if maybe you have a helicopter, but even a helicopter is going to be paying attention to wind. It's that sort of abstraction that in some senses reveals its ignorance, because there's not every way up a mountain. And in fact, mountain climbers pick mountains, and hierarchies of mountains develop. And everybody is wanting to climb these certain mountains because these certain mountains have certain qualities. And in fact, you have this entire world of both a given world of constraints and desired achievements and desired goals. That's what, in fact, gives meaning to the whole process. And it sounds smart to say, well, there's millions of mountains. Well, yeah, there are, but you know what? They're all at Yosemite on El Capitan, and they're all going to Mount Everett. And there are lots and lots of other mountains, but each one is valued and prized for different things, for different reasons. And in fact, there's a highest mountain, and that's why there's this big long line of people trying to get up Everest, because it's the tallest mountain. You say, well, you can climb Mount Diablo down here between Sacramento and the Bay Area. Yeah, you can. You can drive your car up it. Is that what we're talking about? Well, you can drive your car up the mountain any old way. And when you say it that way, you say, no, you can't. I don't care what kind of car you have. You can't drive your car up any mountain any old way. Someone who says that absolutely knows nothing about mountains. So
you found your path up one particular mountain. That's
okay. Your path. Well, now there are the constraints.
Great. You get to the top of the mountain. You can see all of the things around you. But if I climb to the top of Killington in the middle of the spine of the Green Mountains in Vermont, I can see New York. I can see the edge of New Hampshire. I can see almost down into Massachusetts, depending on the weather conditions, and I can almost see Canada. But I can't see Tibet. I can't see Mexico. I can't see the middle of the Pacific Ocean. What I stress is that there are an infinite number of paths. I don't believe in just one particular.
And what the argument he made there seems to undermine the other argument that there's a specific mountain, and the specific mountain affords different things and different limitations. You say, well, all things and limitations are the same. Well, not exactly. There's near infinite numbers of things and limitations, but yet hierarchies develop very quickly. And in fact, the presence on something like this means that we actually desire a little bit of competition and achievement in order to achieve something that we both desire and perhaps might not both be able to attain in equal measure.
physical, mortal existence. I believe in reincarnation. That goes into the realm of science more even than spirituality almost.
I just had to pause there.
And so I don't personally feel compelled to do that. And also the idea of a society, yes, for a society, maybe they need more rigor, and that rigor is ever changing. One religion rises up, they get slaughtered or they get converted, they slaughter and convert others, and this is the history of organized religion. Another reason why
when Christian missionaries were trying to convert people who are not tied into the main networks of civilization, these tiny little groups that live in jungles or in very far out of the way places, out of the way in terms of the network. Why do these groups kill strangers sight unseen? We're going to blame that on organized religion. No, they almost are poster children for the opposite of organized religion. Yet somehow we're going to blame humanity's bloodthirstiness on religion when nature is red in tooth and claw. Where is the bloodthirstiness coming from? Is it coming from the upper register? Or is it pervasive in terms of humanity?
skeptical of ever supporting one, although the orthodoxy is less bloodthirsty than most of the other major organized religions that have existed.
The Tsar.
So congrats for that. What I would say, though, is that what works for a society doesn't necessarily work for an individual. If you're talking about an initiatory system in Christ,
well, I guess Plato's Republic is out then.
Of course, Jesus deviates from the religious orthodoxy, not the Orthodox Church, but the orthodoxy of his own day. It isn't a Pharisee. He isn't following the Sadducee.
Jesus says to his rivals, because rivalries exist, he says, if you knew Moses, you would know me. In fact, Jesus was basically asserting, as many groups do, as almost each Christian rival denomination does, we better encapsulate it.
Tradition isn't following, in large part, technically Roman law, going into the temple and then, whipping people because they're money lenders and they're basically a bunch of grifting shysters and the bankers of the day.
That is something that someone might say, having only a cursory understanding of Jesus cleansing the temple. Just saying, you might find that hey, I give hot takes. That's sort of a hot take. And again, that hot take itself illuminates the fact that he takes present populism and reads it onto the text and says, this is what is happening there. Instead of, let's say, maybe a more thoroughgoing knowledge of the traditions around the temple, the role that in the tradition that Messiah and temple, why they were together, why, in fact, Herod revitalized the temple as sort of a messianic move, and on and on and on and on. But unless you actually devote yourself deeper into a tradition, you might look at that and have a hot take. And maybe you're right, maybe you're wrong. Maybe it doesn't matter, maybe it does.
Didn't follow that path, was one of the individuals who became the master as opposed to getting initiated by a master. And throughout time, we see this happening again and again. And by the way, I'm not declaring myself to be some sort of spiritual master, but I believe that if you want to become more knowledgeable...
But that's implicit in this autodidact, rugged individual take on the right path to spirituality, is that there's no master higher than me. And so everyone's a master. And in a sense, when everybody's a master, nobody's a master.
Help others, etc. You don't have to...
and right there was the Christian tell.
Follow if you want again and again. And by the way, I'm not declaring myself to be some sort of spiritual master, but I believe that if you want to become more knowledgeable, help others, etc.
Help others. Why? Christianity rolled through our culture and is so much part of the background we don't even recognize it anymore.
You don't have to follow that one path up the mountain or any other specific path. And I don't know whether you believe people on those other paths can make it to the top of your mountain or not, but they can find their way up. They don't necessarily need a bunch of signposts, or at least they don't necessarily need a guide. You can see the top of the mountain from the ground level. Well, then find your way up the mountain. And on the way, you'll see cool mushrooms and pine trees and maybe a deer and all of these other wonderful things. And I think sometimes people are so fixated on this end goal that they can't see the forest for the trees.
And this is a sort of stream of consciousness. I do stream of consciousness all the time. But, oh, by the way, we're going to have, again, what is the attention paid to the mushroom? I don't need to look at any one particular mushroom because I know all mushrooms. I know all mushrooms. All mushrooms are the same. Well, you're pausing on that mushroom. The pause itself is exactly what Pageau is saying. Now, maybe it's a tiny little pause, but it's not going to be the brotherhood of mushrooms.
So then would you default to assertive perennialism then, I guess you would say? Maybe not a Canonian perennialism, but maybe the sentiment maybe is there.
Are you asking me?
Oh yeah. But then we'll get Jonathan. But
what I'm just saying is that I think that the main importance is not on where you end up.
The right way is not.
It's how you get there and the experiences you have along the way.
Where you end up or how you get the experiences you have along the way.
Those human experiences are meaningful.
It's the meaning junkie. But, well, what if killing people is like the thing? No, not that. Well, why not? Well, because you're not supposed to kill or hurt other people. Well, why? Well, see, that's built in already to your system. And, well, the reason we reject organized religions is because they kill people. Oh, and people who are not initiated into organized religions don't kill people? That people who are in tiny little groups who have not been touched by world religions and are usually doing their animist self, they're perfectly peaceful and nonviolent? That idea went out a long, long time ago. And it was destroyed by actually meeting such people who were killing people almost immediately, just as in some ways, well, it's naturalism, just like chimps will attack another chimp that encroaches into their territory. This is almost the definition of what a territorial animal does. So,
yeah. I mean, I get it. I think, let's say, First of all, it's important to understand that Christ, even though in the story of Christ, so we need to take it seriously. In the story of Christ, he is the God-man, like he is an incarnation, and that's the way Christians understood it. But he still is initiated, because when he goes to see Saint John the Baptist, Saint John doesn't want to initiate him, but Christ says this has to happen. Like I have to actually participate in this pattern. You have to initiate me, so that. For the sake of others, you could say. And so I don't think there's the idea that Christ is like just a rebel, I think doesn't hold up in his story. There are some aspects of him where he's bucking corruption and bucking the things that don't work. But he also says that, he tells the people that they have to, that the Pharisees are sitting in the seat of Moses, and that they should follow the Pharisees because they basically are the ones that have received the tradition from Moses, but they just shouldn't do what they're doing because what they're doing is corrupt and evil. And so I think Christ actually does participate in this system, but he understands also that there's an issue happening, that something is happening. I mean, he knows that Jerusalem is going to be destroyed. And so he talks about that in the text. And so he knows that this system is going away.
Which is actually has everything to do with Jesus' cleansing of the temple.
This system of sacrifice that's there in Judaism is going away. Like, it's going to happen. And he's like, get ready for it. It's going to happen. And then what? And so he also does modify the tradition in a way that makes it more universal. It kind of opens up the Hebraic tradition for in a universal way, and then modifies some of the rituals in order to kind of encompass everybody. So to remove, basically Christians remove circumcision, they change it with baptism, all this kind of stuff. But it doesn't, I don't think Christianity sees itself as just a departure from what they receive, but rather as a kind of, especially in the Orthodox tradition, like a continuation, but a universalization of the faith. And I think that's also
I think that's true of Orthodoxy, Catholicism, and Protestantism.
important. It's also important to look at the particulars of the traditions and what they're doing. So like we need to take that seriously.
Now I'm out of time. I wanted to at least touch on this. I'll see if I pick this up again. I don't know, but I thought it was a very interesting conversation. And yeah, let me know what you think. Leave a comment.